If you have said to yourself, I should write that, or if someone has said to you, you should write that, then I'm talking to you because you need to write. And that's why you're tuned in to yWrite. Hi, welcome to yWrite. I'm your host, Angela Grout, and I thank you for tuning in to another episode to find out why writers write and why you should be writing your story too. Today, I have a guest who has also become a friend over the years. We have been writing together at the Springfield Museum Creative Writers Groups for several years now, and he's a memoir writer. I want to tell you a little bit about Robert Butler. He has been documenting his life and bringing legacy to his love of theater, writing, teaching, and all of his many adventures. He has just finished writing his book titled Entrances and Exits, and we're going to talk to him about the writing of his book. Robert was born in England, so you'll be very excited to hear his accent, and I'm very excited to listen to his distinguished voice as well. He was a teacher and an actor and a director of theater. He's been on the radio, he has acted in live television commercials, and he has a master's and PhD. His passion has always been teaching, and of course acting and directing. He has directed at the Nairobi National Theater, and now he does consulting work for a national publishing company in Connecticut. He has been all over the world teaching, from Kenya to England to Africa to the United States, and today he's here in the studio with me in Agawam, Massachusetts at Studio 954, and I want to welcome Robert Butler. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming in live to the studio.
Oh, thank you, Angela, for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Well, I'm honored to have you. I mean, it's been an honor and a privilege to get to know you as a friend and as a writer. And I don't even want to think how long we've been writing at the museum. I mean, it's been years.
Long time.
Long time. Yeah. And, I know when we write in the room, what we write in the room stays in the room. However, what you've written in the room has now come to the bindings of a book.
That's true.
So we're taking it out of the room.
Yes, and it's called Entrances and Exits, with a sort of nod to Shakespeare, who wrote All the World's a Stage. But it's also a nod to my life, my stage life, and directing. And also there's a byline there also. It says the unsettled life of a sometime theatre arts professor.
Yes.
And so my life has certainly been unsettled in these long years.
Well, I think all of our lives tend to be a little unsettled because, the roads we travel, we never know where we're headed, even though we can have goals to reach them.
Yes.
The way that you've written this book, I love, because, I know when we were writing it, you kind of would write a little bit out of order, but sometimes chronological order, but the book came together in a chronological order. Was that your intention?
Well, I wrote many stories over the years, in those writing classes with Jan Sadler, and a nod to Jan Sadler, because did you know her?
So no, I came in right after Jan passed away, and I was with Teresa Chamberlain.
Yes.
So that was 7
Well, Jan
ago.
was a stickler for keeping to the rules, and one of the cardinal rules was that when you read something, the response would tell you what was right and what was working, not what was missing or what was wrong.
Right.
And so it was a very supportive sort of environment with which to begin writing. And of course, I spent many years writing before that. But many essays academically, a couple of theses, and of course my PhD dissertation on Simon Gray, an English playwright. And although I had a management position in my second career with a publishing company, when I left there, I wrote a couple of book-length technical economic reports, which were published by that company. On the way, I tried my hand at writing short stories, and I never thought they were very good. I did write a play when I was at the University of Minnesota at a playwriting course there, and it was performed in Minneapolis. I've never foisted it on any other theater group. But it's long laid in the
full-length play. Full-length play.
No, it isn't. It was a short one-act play. Yeah.
Well, you're such a prolific writer that you've done the academics and the creative arts, and using all of that really I'm sure guided you to write your memoir, because just thinking about your past and where you've come from. And again, the title's so great because you entered all these different, realms of your life. So it's like you entered and then you show how you exited out of that. And many of them are very graceful, because it's like, even as a teacher, if you're in Kenya teaching, and then you get transferred, for another job, it's like I could always see in the book that how it really morphs the way it was supposed to go for you.
Yes. Yeah. And I think when I look back over my life, I've taken risks, and I don't know whether that comes through or not. I don't sort of underline it.
So the middle of this book, the middle of it is you climbing. Is it Mount Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
And literally and I think it's like the middle of the book, you're at the peak of the mountain, and I'm thinking, what an adventure. And like, we're right in the middle of your story, and it's like you are at the top.
Well,
you've taken a lot of adventures, not just in your writing and in your work career, but climbing and hiking. And
well, that was a bit of indulgence on my part, putting that little chapter in there about climbing Kilimanjaro, because it didn't really go with the story I was telling, which was how I became a professor of theatre arts, and what happened to make me, or to encourage me to leave it and to try something else. And I thought long and hard about that particular safari, and couldn't resist putting it in, although it's really...
No, it's perfect, because it really shows, your career moving in the way of climbing Kilimanjaro,
Yeah.
And it is, for anyone who's a writer, an actor, a director, the steps to get into those positions aren't as easy as, getting a job at your local grocery store.
No, there are a lot of risks. It's a risk as an actor when you step onto a stage, as you may know. It's
especially with live theater.
Live theater, of course. And it's an even bigger risk if you're audacious enough to direct a play, and to create from the words on paper to this event that is live and full of action, and will entertain and mean something, and so it was a risk when I was 17 to leave home and go and get a job in London.
Yeah.
It was a risk when I at 18 entered a school as an unqualified teacher to teach 38 11-year-olds. Mm-hmm. It was a risk, as you say, to leave home and go and get a job in London. It was a risk when I at 18 entered a school as an unqualified teacher to teach 38 11-year-olds. Mm-hmm. It was a risk, as you say, to leave home and go and get a job in London. It was a risk when I at 18 entered a school as an unqualified teacher to teach 38 11-year-olds. It was a risk, as you say, to to choose to go to leave England, where you'd been there for 22 years, and as a 22-year-old go off to a country in Africa that you knew nothing about.
Very brave, very courageous, especially being so young. And, I know you were born literally right after World War II started. And it just seems that your entrance and exits, which is that perfect title of your entrance into the world, like even came with turbulence. I mean, you had bombings, right? I mean, in your town in England.
Yes. Well, not only that. That's part of that unsettled life, that moving around.
Yeah.
And I was when I was born just before the Second World War broke out, so that makes me 85. And about 2 years into the war, and we were living with my grandmother because my father had been drafted or called up, as they say in England, to fight in the war in the RAF. And I didn't see him until I was 6 years old as a result. But I was with my grandmother in this very industrial city of Smethwick, and the big factories all around these streets full of row houses and whatnot, and there were frequent bombings, and just a few minutes after I had been whisked out of my bed when the Germans were bombing and taken down into a hole in the ground,
a hole in the ground, yeah,
covered by
you described that well, because you think these fancy bunkers.
It's called it's like sort of like a coffin that, covered with corrugated iron sheeting, and but anyway, a few minutes after doing that, a bomb fell very close to the house, and a wall fell right on my bed.
I mean, you've narrowly escaped death many times.
So, what happened then was that I was shunted off to live with someone I called Granny Pass in the countryside of close to in Nottinghamshire. So that's where I spent a lot of time during the war. But when things settled down, I was brought back, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you had an aunt. I know. I remember hearing all the stories of your aunt, who was the actress, and
She was a contortionist.
She was a contortionist.
She was a contortionist, and I that was my first introduction to the theatre. I must have been 6 years old, or perhaps a little older, but my mother took me to the Birmingham Hippodrome Theatre. I don't know whether it's still there, but we at the interval, she took me backstage and to the dressing rooms, and the dressing room was full of women in a state of undress, and of course I was quite small, and my vision was of fishnet stocking legs, some of which had large holes in them. They were wounded stockings, and there was a smell of sweat and grease paint, and I was very impressed by all of this. And there was lots of chatter and screams and laughter and whatnot. And then we came out of the dressing room to go back to our seats, and I was confronted by this midget who was my size, and I was looking straight, but he was an adult. And I'd never seen anything like this before. And he was part of Morton Fraser's harmonica gang. And if you ever go on to YouTube, you can find their acts still. And the midget is the guy who causes all the mischief while they're trying to play, a tune on the harmonicas. It's very amusing. But but that was my first introduction to the theater, it never left me.
The way you tell your story verbally is really very similar to how you wrote it also, because you're so eloquent with descriptions. You really, get us the descriptions, and they're just like speaking of the wounded, fishnets, and, it's really fascinating to me how so many people want to write their memoirs, but they don't know where to begin. They don't know how to get it started. And, you've not only started it, you've finished this one. I mean, this isn't a biography. It's not your whole life, but it brings you pretty much to about this point.
It's not far off. But these stories that I wrote, with Jan Sadler and with later Teresa, yes. They lay, I looked at them and I tried to put them together, and when I put them together, I wasn't happy about them in that state, and I put them away, and I didn't come back to them for a couple of 3 years, maybe longer, because I needed to find a sort of storyline, and the story was how I, became a professor of theater arts. That was the story. Yeah. The story that was my important story to tell, not just it's part of your life story. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Right.
There was a lot of stories that I didn't include because they weren't. That's why I was worried about the Kilimanjaro chapter, because it really wasn't.
No, but even you brought the human aspect of your life to it. Not that it's not all human, but like that's a part of you that is a little separate from your theater, so that this way we can understand why you have been such a risk taker, because saying, oh yeah, I think I'll take this job in, Africa now, when you've never been there, nothing, you're so young, and then, you go, you share, your marriages, and you share your children, you introduce us to your life,
and of course that's the
journey.
A risk. That's a risk too, when you share your life with have I said too much? I was encouraged, actually. One of the writers who bought this book was impressed by how honest I was.
Yes.
And she said it encouraged her to be more honest in her memoir writing.
Yeah, because if you're not happy with the part of your life, to write about it in an honest way sometimes can make other people who were part of your life at that time feel not as important, or like, and you do, I think every writer struggles with letting their words go, but being able to tell it in a way that doesn't put harm on anyone.
Yes. Well, I had 2 children, and whose mother I divorced, and I had to write about her and how I met her and so on. Again, it was meeting in the theater world, but of course, what happened subsequent to that, and conscious of their feelings, but at the same time wanted to tell the story as I saw it.
Yeah, and of your feelings too, yes. And how things changed.
Yes. Yeah.
So, when you were writing this, you were doing individual pieces, some based off of prompts to kind of get the writing flowing, or sort of.
Sometimes.
And then, so you end up with 18 different little stories.
Yeah, or more. Yeah.
And what's the process of weaving them together and figuring out which darlings not to put in?
Well, as I said, once I'd found what the important story was to tell, it was relatively easy to begin to tell that story. And as I told that story, I selected individual writings that fitted at that time. And I chose not to start when I was born and so on. I chose it to start when I was 10 years old. On the day I was going to take an important examination, which in England they called the 11 plus examination. And that exam, if you passed it, you went to a grammar school and took French and Latin, and it was the road that you took to go to university.
Yeah, further your education.
Yeah, but little me at 10 years old had a mother who had left the home. I was hearing impaired, still am, because of rheumatic fever. I was in poor physical shape because of that rheumatic fever. And I was emotionally upset. And I was with a father who really had no real interest in me. He never did anything with me. We never sort of
had the father-son bonding relationship.
No, I was never sort of bonded in that sort of way. I think in part because he was granny reared. I don't think he had any idea of how to be a father. He didn't have a father in his life.
He lacked the skills.
Yeah. And I think that business of the war and coming back to a 6-year-old who was a stranger and hadn't sort of, and it was vice versa, of course, with me. So we didn't, but here I was at 10 with this father who called me a dreamer. He hadn't any idea that I was hearing impaired, and that's why I was a dreamer, because I didn't hear him.
Yeah, you were silent
half the time. A slow developer, I think he referred to me sometimes to other people, which wasn't very complimentary. Anyway, I failed that exam, and so went to a Tweenaway secondary modern school, and had to do, instead of French and Latin, I had to do horticulture and woodwork and metalwork and all those good things, And it was only later that I passed another exam that, put me back in the road, on the road. But then at 17, lacking parental guidance, I dropped my studies and went to London.
Yeah, but you dropped your studies, and then a few years later, you're now teaching in universities, and you have this, unwritten, education that you've given to so many people with, teaching them, whether, it's writing, in the schools and in the theaters and directing them. And it really was, it was a passion. I mean, you were...
Oh, it was. And it's extraordinary thing was, I mean, I was a performer from 11 years old. I was lucky enough to have a teacher that came into my life who was really my father figure, my mentor, a guy who encouraged me to start acting. And my first performance was the midshipmite in HMS Pinafore, I remember, and then there were numerous school plays and other amateur productions, and then it was Africa, it was Kenya, it was Nairobi. Would you believe what a wonderful cultural jewel it was? I mean, I had no idea.
You took a big risk going there, and it
paid off.
Paid off big time for you in so many ways.
That's the thing about taking risks. Without taking risks, you don't grow.
Yeah.
I try to encourage my kids and my grandchildren to be bold and to take risks. And
have your children and grandchildren read the book?
Well, my son designed that cover.
Yeah, I love the cover.
He was lucky enough to be accepted in Cooper Union in New York City as an artist, a student of art and design, and he's been a designer ever since. And so he designed the cover. He designed the book itself. You know, the print, the style,
the layout,
the whole style, and I don't know whether he also said, "Dad, you know what you need are maps."
Yeah, I'm so glad you're bringing that up, because it really does bring a visual to everything, and putting the maps in the books. Yeah, let's turn this way. Really shows all your journeys. Where you were
in England.
I mean,
that's right.
It's really cool how he was able to do this, and this is what editors and things like that can do for your books. Yeah. But just the color and saying, okay, when you're reading certain chapters, you can go back. He's inserted some photos also. So it really, I love the pictures of you on stage and directing. Now, so, for people looking to write their memoirs, you don't always have to publish it for the public. Although I'm highly encouraging you to share this with the public. But you have gotten this published to share with, your family, your friends, kind of your inner circle.
And I was amazed that all the writing group wanted to buy a copy, and so
we've been witnessing you writing it for so long, and all of the wonderful stories behind the stage, and of your aunt, and producing and traveling. We're like, this guy's had so many experiences, and that's why when I saw the title, I'm like, that's it. You entered into an experience, and then you gracefully exited it to go into another one. And that's a huge lesson that everybody can follow in life. Whether their exit is forced upon them or offered to them.
Yes, indeed. And some I went when I left teaching. When I left, decided finally to go. I went to New York University Business School, Stern's School of Business, and it was a special course for PhDs who wanted to transfer from academia into business, and where am I going with this? What were we talking about?
Studying for school and sharing the entrances and exits.
Why
you're not publishing it with the world.
When I don't know. I've lost track. But I at the end of the course, I had to meet with a psychologist. Mm-hmm. I think it was a psychologist, not a psychiatrist. And she said, "Oh, did you know you're depressed?" And of course, I was depressed at the time. But she also looked at my resume and said, "Gosh, you've done so much. You've been all over." And it was true. I counted the number of moves that I'd made up to that point, 1985, 86. They were over 20. And of course, more were to come. And I've lost count now. But life is so much more settled. And I have my last chapter there is Exit to the Country. And that's where I've been for the last, 25 years.
Yeah, because you retired from teaching in 1986. And then you have more adventures.
Publishing company, yes, and that was.
You've been writing this memoir, and I hope there's going to be a part 2 to find out what you're doing in the country.
Well, I don't know.
I think you have a whole story about that in the country.
Well, maybe.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show to, share the journey of your life, which you have now put into the pages of this book. Thank you for sharing the book with me so that I could read it, and, it's given me a lot of lessons, there's a lot of entrances and exits in my own life. So you're a super great role model to show the gracefulness of accepting, when it's time to exit something and when it's time to take on a new challenge.
Find something new.
Say, okay, you can try this, and if it doesn't work, then gracefully exit and try something else. But you really have written a wonderful story. You've had a great life legacy for sure, just in your teaching, but in your own personal life as well. So, if somebody wants to get in touch with you to learn more about you, or if they have, questions about maybe how they might woo you back into teaching a class, how do they get in touch with you?
Never do that. But have we run out of time?
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay. Well, I mean, if someone wants to buy the book, I can certainly arrange that. All they need to do is to send an email to me, Robert.Butler, 1939, that year again, at iCloud.com.
Okay, I'm going to add that to the links so that people can get in touch with you for that. I highly recommend, anyone who is into, teaching or theater or acting to get a copy of his book, because it's going to help you to develop, your own life following a little bit of the shadow of his footsteps to see. And, just to get to know Robert, because he's, so prolific with his writing and with how much he shares and how honest he is. And, of course, his descriptive wording. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you.
This has been really, really nice. I have a little segment of the show, which I'm going to do right now with my audience, where I give them a writing prompt. So, we're talking about writing memoirs today. And, Robert Butler has written his memoir to share with, immediate family and friends. And, if you could write your own memoir, that you're not sharing with the world, you're sharing with your family. Sometimes you need to pass down that family recipe. But I want you to think about what your life story would be about to be able to share. So maybe, take a few minutes and, just write down a couple key points of what's happened in your life that has made you who you are. Could be your jobs, could be your children, could be the 15 moves that you've had if you've, had different homes. So just take some time today, set your timer for 10 minutes, write down these little bullet points, and then, maybe you want to set your timer again for another 20 minutes and pick one of them and just start writing. So I want to thank you, my audience, for tuning in to another episode of yWrite. I love having this show, and if you're watching, it's because of you. I want to help you to become a writer. I want you to learn about the writers that are on this show and all of the different processes that are out there to get your story on paper, whether it's fact fiction or a figment of your imagination. It's all worth writing. So thank you for tuning in to yWrite, and have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.